Kathleen today too, which was nice. I think they like your acronym.
All right, we should be live. Let me go to the recording here. Where the heck is the recording? Oh, there we go. Excellent. Well, we've got another great edition today with Megan and I, joined by Kathleen Schwab. Kathleen, thank you for joining us early in the morning there in California. And we'll give you a proper intro in a moment. But maybe first kicking over to our weekly poll. So last week we asked the question around account-based strategy, and one of the things that I was wrestling with, or why I prompted to post this question, was I noticed a number of companies that are in various stages of embarking on an account-based strategy. So I asked just an open-ended question: where do you feel like the biggest challenge is currently? And very interesting to me was, I must have got these categories right because nobody said other. So on the positive, I'm getting better at these polls week after week, but better skills on the people side. And although you can't see this when I click through the 24 votes, the interesting thing is I noticed a number of executives that had posted that response. And then kind of on the operating side, where the executives are probably a little bit more distant, sales and marketing alignment was the number 2 choice as part of that. So, in this chaotic world that we're operating in, getting that kind of alignment with everybody working from the home office, or now kind of blending home office and future work office, I can imagine that is super challenging. But I don't know, Megan, did you have any observations on this poll?
Yeah, I thought this was a great question. And I think I'm seeing both, right? I'm working with all kinds of different companies, and I'm seeing 2 things, right? One is that sales and marketing alignment continues to be really hard. And I think honestly, I'm seeing it go all the way back to saying, have we agreed on who we want as our customer? And the fact of that not being clear, and not being clear in many cases, to me, is like an easy thing to fix in many ways, and could go a long way to helping sales and marketing get on the same page. And then the other thing I think is measurement related too, in terms of just sort of the persistence of the mindset of we have to get volume of leads for marketing, and then they hand them to sales and sales takes them forward. Like that's a very old fashioned way of thinking and not reflective of the buying reality. So I think, but those behaviors and that sort of mindset persists. So that's, I think, also causing some breaks with sales and marketing. But what I also find interesting is they don't want there to be those breaks. So I think sales and marketing genuinely want to work together. It's just they need to be able to build those bridges to be able to do it. So that then I think leads into the next one, which is skills, right? And I've been hearing this for a long time. We used to do CMO roundtables with at Sirius, and one of the things that CMOs would come in and say is, I'm hiring people who are relatively early in their career, or people who've been doing marketing for a while that have been doing it in a way that doesn't reflect kind of an account-based reality. And how do I get those people upskilled quickly? And it ends up being a little bit of a catch-22 though, right? Because you've got marketing leaders who are saying, I need people with better skills, but you've got companies who are saying, we don't believe in investing in skills development for marketing, right? We spend tons on sales, but we spend very little on marketing. Like pick a conference, go see an event. Well, that's not going to do it. There really needs to be, I think, a rethinking about how marketers need to learn and what they need to learn and where they can go to learn it. And I think that's a big deal, right? Because it's not about finding different people. It's about the people you have who know your company learning the things they need to do, and they want to, right? They're open to it. So those are the 2 things that I'm seeing.
Absolutely. And Kathleen, I'm going to introduce you in a second, but did you have any comments or observations on these statistics, or even on the comments below that I started scrolling around down to?
Well, there's going to be so many intersections, I think, between what I'm going to talk about and both your poll answers as well as some of the comments that you made. Let's just go on, because I think if we talk about your poll within the context of VUCA and some of the strategies that various companies and different industries are developing to work with VUCA type situations, I think some of the path forward might become a little bit more clear.
Okay, great. And a lot of you may recognize, by the way, Kathleen coming from IDC's CMO practice. Kathleen was there for what, 9 years, Kathleen, I think you had
Yes.
mentioned, as VP of IDC's CMO advisory practice. So prior to that, she had been a CMO for a number of companies, including Computerland. And right now she's actually intending to write a book about marketing organizations and effectiveness. So super excited that you could join us from California, because I know it's a little bit earlier there. And yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about what you just mentioned, the VUCA and the volatile, uncertain environment.
Great. Well, maybe we could start there, because the VUCA acronym is a really interesting one. It was coined by the US Army in, I think it was the late 80s, to talk about the environment that they found as they were coming, into the Cold War. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the US Army had been used to working in sort of the World War II world, which is very, detailed planning, very efficient, well-documented command and control kinds of world that, where armies from, both of those environments were true. Both those environments would come together, and that's what war was. But as the developed world kind of stepped back, a lot of what happened after the Cold War was that the environment became, more like terrorists and stateless enemies and shape shifting. What, before we started this, we started talking about some of the books where this particular way of addressing the military was formed. I think I talked about Team of Teams, written by Stanley McChrystal. John, I think you had one that you mentioned. What was the
Way of the Seals by Mark Devine? Yeah, very similar.
Yeah. So, but lest do people think that this idea of VUCA is just related to the military. Let me give you a little bit of an example of how broad this concept and this type of an environment goes. So I'm gonna just do a little thought experiment with me. Okay, so let's say that we're out of the pandemic, which itself is kind of a VUCA situation, but we're out of the pandemic and you're going to plan an event, okay, for 6 months in advance. And here we are in June, and we go outside and the sun is shining and it's hot, and we say, this is what the world is like. And we start making our plans. And let's say that in this thought experiment, we really don't know very much about weather. So we make our plans in June and we start to execute, and we, have all the different people in our organization that are working. And then we open the doors in December, and boy, are we surprised, because December is not at all like June, right? Because in fact, even in December, even if we did know a little bit about December, and we knew about the fact that it was going to be a little colder and stuff, the December 11th, we really don't know about, right? We don't know if it's going to be a snowstorm. We don't know if it's going to have the beautiful blue skies, but be a little cold, because weather is VUCA. And it's the reason why, if you have a weather app, you can get a pretty good, even with all that huge amounts of data that companies have in the background now, you can get a pretty good idea of what's going to happen tomorrow. But like if you're in a very volatile situation, where like you're in the winter storms and everything, you can't even depend on what tomorrow is going to be, right? And the longer you go out in time, the more, or I should say, the less amount of predictability that you get. So it's really been kind of information science that has revealed kind of the patterns of the natural world. Before we had computers, everybody kind of knew that, if you were going to go plan a picnic, you didn't really know what the weather was going to be. But it wasn't until really computers started and we started getting all this data and started being able to crunch all this data that we started to discover what were the try to kind of explain the patterns of what scientists call a complex adaptive system. And markets are complex adaptive systems. So they act different than we expect them to.
I can totally see that with B2B, and especially with kind of this push toward account-based marketing while we're all selling and marketing in a pandemic world. I mean, that sounds almost identical to what you're talking about here of there's just so much uncertainty of what is this new environment that we're in.
Yeah, the pandemic has added what some people call a black swan scenario into an already complex environment. Marketing gets its complexity from the interactions of millions of autonomous actors. Each one of them is making a decision on their own. So we got customers, we've got companies, we've got influencers, social networks, regulatory industries, partners. All these different groups are making their own decisions. So creates all these different feedback loops and has just introduces a huge amount of uncertainty into the situation what digital did over the last 20 years or so is increase the number of interactions that go on and speeded up these feedback loops. And now they're just ricocheting all over the place. It's like you're being in a batting cage, being hit by all of these different things. So this is what I've been researching and studying. It's something I've been aware of for years, but it's really in the digital world become really significant. And my view, and I think the reason why we're talking today, is I think that where companies are going with account-based marketing has a lot of the hallmarks of what various companies and various industries have seen is a better way to work, as opposed to the traditional ways of working, which were invented in the early 20th century.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Kathleen, because as you say, it's account-based strategies generally attempt to impose a higher degree of order on the way that you're thinking about the universe that you're working in, right? So I think by reducing the volatility and the uncertainty, by saying this is a defined universe that I would like to work in, you make it easier to reduce then the complexity and the ambiguity by at least narrowing down your field of play. So I think that it does. I mean, I see it from that angle, but what do you think companies need to keep in mind when they're sort of trying to manage the reality of a process of a buying and an experience process that they don't control, right? The customer is the one responsible for sort of their reality. We're just sort of, we're trying to help them through it. But how do you think companies need to sort of plan differently or behave differently with that in mind? And how do you think account-based can sort of help them with that?
Well, one of the ways, when you think about a very, very fast-paced environment, what leaders who are starting down this path, including those in marketing, have learned is that fast feedback that's very information rich is critical. So again, if you think about that idea of having an event in December, if you had gone outside occasionally and said, oh, things are changing, and then be able to adjust your plans almost on the fly, by the time you got to December, you would be a lot more prepared. You still wouldn't know on December 11th whether or not it was going to be sunny or a snowstorm, but you would have a lot of information. So this idea of being able to dip incrementally into what's going on, and information, this is a go back to the concept of why we need information and digital and data and stuff because of that, is that's what will reveal the patterns, because there's no way that you can go out into the world and sample the millions of people that are going to influence your customers. Yeah. So the idea of having a, detailed plan, execute, big payoff, that is a really, really bad strategy when you are in a complex world. And we talked about the idea of, COVID being complex, but the reality is that that's the way that sales and marketing has always been. Yeah. So COVID aside, You don't know what your customer is going to do. Tomorrow, your customer could have a new buyer come into the thing and completely blow up the deal that you've been working on for months. So this idea that somehow it's going to go, oh, we're going to go back to stability. It never was stable. It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
So that being able, so in an account-based marketing, how do you do that fast feedback, that information rich? Well, one of it obviously is a data problem. So the whole thing about what I love about account-based marketing is the synergies that are being created between all of the different data sources, being able to go to that single source of the truth, which has been sort of the, something we've been all trying to, but I think there's been a lot more progress made over the last few years with some of the technologies and strategies. So that's one of the major things.
Mm-hmm. Well, a question I get a lot is from sellers actually, who are saying, hey, marketing's sending me all of this information. I don't know what to do with it. Like, what do you think are some ways that, and then of course that challenges the whole idea of account-based, right? Because it's not account-based marketing if you're not doing anything different based on what you know about the account, right? So it sort of goes back to the drawing board and back to that alignment question. What do you recommend that marketers do to make it easier for their counterparts in sales to take advantage of some of that really rich information that they have? Any recommendations there?
So I'm gonna poke at one of the words that you used, which was counterparts. Because another strategy that is useful in working in environments that are very VUCA is for there to have multidisciplinary teams. Okay, that was one of the things in the team of teams. The whole concept of the team of teams was that you had people working together in an organizational structure that allowed them to work together. Turns out people are actually really good at working in really ambiguous situations. I mean, if you go back to that concept of the events, guarantee you have an event team, they walk out the door, it's cold. Boy, in 4 hours, they would have that thing flipped around, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've all worked with event teams. They are awesome. They know what to do. So the idea of having a multidisciplinary team of taking salespeople and marketing people and actually have them be accountable together. So not this serial handoff, right?
Agreed.
So the part of the 20th century organizational structure that it's very efficient, but it's also not very adaptable, not very agile, not very innovative, is to have the, not only the, we are marketing and we are sales, but also even within marketing, we are the brand group, we are the lead gen group, we are the ops group, we are this, we are that. And that is just a recipe for making things harder for yourself. So where you have, if you look at an account-based marketing team in a company that's doing it well, they will have sales representation in marketing, and they will add vice versa.
Yes.
So that when you hand over that data, I mean, you want to have specialties, right? People, you can't have everybody knowing everything. But if you put a multidisciplinary team together, that marketing person can explain what's going on, and the salespeople are catching up on the fly instead of catching the ball at the end.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
No counterparts. No counterparts. We're on the same team.
Yep, agreed. And I use that as a collaborative term, not a separate term, but I understand.
Okay.
I hear you.
Good point.
But I think your point's well taken, right? And that's I've seen that be very successful, sort of groupings where you're sort of organized around customers, not around silos, right?
There you go.
You bring your expertise together around a set of customers or a customer if it's more of a pursuit team type model. But for sure that works well. And there's a winning by design construct of a pod where you got sales, marketing, whoever else, customer success, account management, whoever else needs to be involved in the support of a group of customers. And they work as a team of teams, essentially, right? Each of them representing the capabilities and the expertise that they have, but in the service of that particular group of customers. I like that model a lot. I'm with you. But John, it looked like
I love that word pod too. Yeah, that's a good one.
I was just going to support,
not, like Star Trek pod.
Just supporting what you were saying on the team of teams and kind of the information exchange. The other way we've seen that is the weekly or sometimes even daily stand-ups between
Yeah.
marketing and sales. So it's not just trusting 100% on the data, it's having a conversation about the insights on the data on a regular cadence to get that communication flow going. And it's probably a byproduct of the team of team concept of they're just now meeting and talking and having those stand-ups. But I think that's a pretty critical ingredient for success in account-based marketing. You got to have those conversations to make sure marketing's focused on the right accounts, and sales is also aware of what marketing is doing.
I love that you brought up the stand-ups, John, because Agile is actually one of the first, maybe what you might call a methodology, which is specifically geared for a VUCA environment.
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably the software developers that hit that digital wall first. And, you know, back in when it was around 2000 or so, when the Agile Manifesto was written, that was when they were realizing that for a number of years, the waterfall method of managing software projects was regularly failing. And they came up with the Agile methodology, which has now been, you know, it's in continual flux as people learn more, and it's being adopted or adapted, I should say, for marketing. But there's really a lot of very positive, useful things for working in this kind of environment that people can get from learning Agile. So
Yeah.
glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I love the application of Agile for marketing. But only when you've got goals, right? Like, I think the thing that drives me nuts is when people use Agile as a substitute for making decisions about what they should be focused on and how they should go after it. So there's something to be said, I think, for saying, hey, as a team, these are the objectives we need to reach as a revenue team, right? Or as a growth team, you know, you're focused on getting to X or Y or a combination of things. After that, I think then the application of Agile to say, like you said about the, you know, the December to June, you know, time lag, right? There are things we know now and things we think we should do, but we need to be able to connect regularly to change and update that based on the actual environment as opposed to the assumptions we made about it. But I feel like if you can combine Agile with at least a clarity around what, you know, what you're trying to do, then you've really got, you know, I think a positive environment and a great way to succeed.
And that's a really important, you know, going back to the, you know, what are the different steps? Having a customer-centric mission is, and that's another thing I like about ABM, is ABM puts the focus, yes, revenue is important, but it's like Jeff Bezos said, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like, we need to have revenue because that's what keeps our business going, but that's not why we're here.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of another concept. If you are very stakeholder focused, not, you know, what's in it for me, how can I make my business more profitable, those kinds of things are important. But if they're your mission, then you're going to miss the mark. And then the way that you keep people accountable and you keep the teams accountable for what they're doing, those are that's a really important thing. So you're right, the measurement and how you measure has to change also when working with these kinds of VUCA worlds.
Yeah, agreed. Well, and you brought up an interesting thing too that just put me in mind of product-led growth, right? And I think why, you know, so many investors and so many companies are saying we have to do product-led growth. It's maybe or maybe not, but I think what they're picking up on is the fact that it is so customer centric. You know, I love the way you phrase that, sort of the customer centric strategy, right? It's about how am I going to get my customer to impact? If I begin there, revenue follows because I've done something that they need and that they value, right? And I think that's, but that, you know, sort of beginning with that in mind and then saying, okay, by delivering that, I will be able to reach my revenue targets, you know, that starts to be a powerful combination as well.
Yes. So
Just
then you can flex your how you do it. The mission is set.
Yeah.
You know where you want the mission to be set. You can't even really predict the revenue because that's also not in your control. But you can set the mission. You can have the executives or the team leaders or whatever set the mission, and then the team decides how, because they're the ones that are on the ground with the customer right then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just noticed the time here. We're about at time. Kathleen, thank you for joining us. Did you have any closing thoughts before we sign off and get ready for next week?
Maybe just for my recommendation is for people to have an open mind, to maybe use this COVID situation of disruption as a aha moment, to think about how they're going to act in the future, and not try to go back to the way things were, but to use it as a opening for thinking about ways of doing things, and to do some research themselves into Agile, into team of teams, into account-based marketing, and what will really work there. I think it's actually a really, really great time to be in marketing.
Totally.
Absolutely. These are exciting. You know, I hate to say it. I actually think this will lead to a revolution of sorts in the way that we think about marketing, the way we think about collaboration across revenue teams. And I love that you're working on research that's going to help people understand and thrive in that environment. I could talk to you all day, Kathleen. So thank you. We loved that you came and
we'll
joined
have
us
more
today.
conversations. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So next week we have Amanda Carty, who's the CMO of Diligent, who will be joining us. And yeah, Kathleen, thanks again for coming out this morning.
Thank you.